Hey there, we're with Cody Lassen, who's a producer, developer, investor, all-around good guy type. I'll have him introduce himself and list his impressive credits, but they're quite impressive indeed. Cody?
Well, it's great to be here. I'm a big fan of what you guys do, and I'm happy to be a small part of this program you're putting together. A little bit of what I do is I produce theater. That's kind of half of my job every week or every day. Generally my own projects where I'm kind of selecting something that speaks to me, something I'm excited about, trying that out of town, and eventually hopefully bringing it to a commercial production, whether that's Broadway, off Broadway, or regionally. The last two shows I did where I was the lead producer was the revival of Spring Awakening, which started in Los Angeles. And then a new show that we actually are marketing as a play, but it's really a musical called Indecent, started at La Jolla, also in Southern California, and is currently playing on Broadway. And then kind of the other hat I wear is I do a lot of consulting for other producers in town, generally hired either directly by the producer or through one of the agencies, kind of helping people figure out market sizing. Is there an audience that wants to see this show that will buy tickets? Trying to figure out what kind of title and key art and taglines are going to convert the most people from being interested to buying tickets. So I really enjoy that because I get to work on projects that aren't necessarily my own, but I get that insider view of. And then occasionally, if there's a project I fall in love with, I'll invest as a co-producer and raise money for the show. If it's not a project that I kind of started, but really am passionate about.
I'm sure our folks would be interested in all of that. The one that made my ears go was that middle chunk about marketing. How do you decide in advance, okay, this is the right title or this is the right demographic? How do you do that market research and
well, it's a little bit art and a little bit science. I'm sorry, I'm literally sweating here because the air conditioning is in my office.
I can see that. Wow.
So this is something that the film and television industry has done for literally decades now. That's still pretty new to the theater industry. So it's about developing a panel of theater goers, right? We get this great information from the Broadway League, or regionally, in Southern California, there's all these organizations that kind of collect data on theater goers. So I know demographically who's coming to see these shows. So we put together a panel of people that look just like those people. And we'll expose them to concepts and ask them, what do you think this show is about? How interested are you in seeing this show? How would you describe the show to your friends and family? And by asking those questions to discrete audiences and maybe working with 4 or 5 different titles and versions of the key art, we can very quickly zero in on, first of all, other problems. Are you selling a musical farce, but the audience thinks it's a serious drama play? So the first thing is kind of a disaster check is, are your audiences at least kind of understanding what the show is? The hope certainly is that one of those concepts really rises to the top and it's very clear that yes, this is the one that's going to get the most interest in your show. Generally what happens is you have 1 or 2 concepts that kind of raise to that level, and then it's more of a gut, decision on the producer's part to decide which direction to go. And we would certainly never want to sell something that the show isn't. I'm never going to say like, this is what you need to do to sell the most tickets. We always want to represent what the show is, but as you can imagine, there's a lot of different ways to sell the show as what it is to an audience.
Right.
And at the end of the day, it's show business, so we want to make sure people are buying tickets.
Right. Does it ever come up that you've got a project where you say, this is the demographic we really are aiming for, this is where the show is actually playing, and they're at odds? Do you at that point adjust the demographic, your goal of the demographic to fit the show, or do you go the opposite direction? Say, boy, we were aiming for a show that was for teenage girls, and it's not hitting that demographic. So would you at that point, would your advice be to change the show to hit the demographic, or accept the fact that it's hitting a demographic and then shift your marketing?
I mean, so most of the work I do is for Broadway shows. And while we like to complain as an industry that our audience, is, to be frank, older and, white, and we're not very diverse, at the moment, most shows don't have enough money to kind of chase that new demographic. So you might have a show that you think is going to skew very young. But when you look at the data, skewing very young might just mean 3 or 4 years lower than the average age of a Broadway show. So for the most part, we're fishing where the fish are, right? We're going after who we know is the Broadway theater goer. Because you only, it's a little different, unlike a movie where you only have that opening weekend to kind of make or break. On a Broadway show, it's an ongoing living thing, so you can kind of change up your marketing a little bit, but there's just not the budget to kind of test out trying to reach those audiences.
Right.
So on a show, like Indecent, which I'm working on now, we certainly are reaching out to audiences, to a younger LGBT audience, because there's certainly a strong message of, LGBT equality, and, that speaks to that show. So, you're going to carve out a little bit of money to go after maybe a younger audience or a niche audience or someone you wouldn't normally, but for the most part, you're going after your, middle-aged, generally female theater goer for New York Broadway shows.
And Cody, are you involved in shows at their very infancy? When a show is only a paragraph or a page or an idea long, and from a marketing standpoint, do you say, all right, this is likely to hit this kind of demographic, and if you skew it this way, it's going to hit that demographic? Do you advise at that level before the show is really even incubated?
That's always my advice to people, is the earlier you get, and whether it's me or whether it's, somebody else doing something similar, or whether it's you trying to do some of this yourself, the earlier you can do that, I think the more chance you have of setting yourself up for success. That being said, most shows, it's tough to raise front money, so you're using that money for, getting rights and optioning materials, and you just don't have the money to spare. So generally I'm brought on kind of pre-opening, maybe 6 to 9 months out. You're really starting to spend money on marketing and advertising, and all of a sudden it's, it's a little easier to stomach spending some money on research. However, my advice is the opposite. And for shows where I'm the general partner, I'm producing the show myself, that's certainly a consideration from day one, is, let's make sure very early on that we're learning as much as we can about the show, learning who the audience might be, how we might be reaching them. Something as simple as choosing your title early on. It could be that the creatives, have 2 or 3 options they're very happy with. Why not go with the one that's going to get the most people to click on that banner, or to, pick up the phone and call telecharge?
Great. And feel free. I can see Cody's in New York. The air conditioning is off. When I'm speaking, Cody, we will cut away from you, so you could feel when I'm talking. You could do that and feel
Perfect.
like So
Okay.
I'll sort of vamp, and I'll be like, and if if I'm interrupting you, it means you're sweating to the So
okay, I'm taking more sip of my iced tea if we're on a break.
exactly when I'm speaking.
Good.
How then do you approach investor types, venture capital types, to entice them, both at the early level, at the what you were calling front money level, and how is that different from halfway through the process, or when the show is up and running or workshopped? Where do the investors get involved, and how is your relationship to them and their relationship to the work different as the work grows up?
Sure. Well, there's a lot of different types of investors. There are certainly people who really get excited about investing at the front money stage. Generally, those are the people who want to kind of be in on the ground floor, want to see a show from the spark of an idea to the opening night on Broadway. Of course, that carries with it a lot more risk, because you could invest in developing a show, and for whatever reason, it either never gets produced or it does an out-of-town tryout and doesn't continue. But on the flip side of that, right, there's more reward involved. The people who are investing at that level are being compensated at a higher rate than the people who wait until just pre-opening or raising the bulk of our money. On the flip side, there are some people who want their investment to be, I don't want to use the term sure thing, because that certainly isn't the case in theater, but it's not the case in any small business. But there are some people who want to wait until we have a theater, we have an opening date. They know this is going to happen. The show could still not be financially successful and close right away, but they know it's going to happen. And those are, 2 very different types of investors. There's also folks who just kind of want to write a check and support the show, support the arts. There are folks who want to make money. They look at this as an investment, albeit a risky one. That, it's very high risk, but there is the chance for a very high reward. A Hamilton or a Wicked doesn't come across that often, but there is always that chance. And I think I also see some people who, treat commercial theater kind of in a similar way as nonprofit theater, or as, supporting the opera or the symphony or a museum. It's, gosh, here's an art form I want to support, I want to share with the world. And there's a nice little bonus of maybe if this is successful, I could make a little money back.
And how early do you get involved with a project? How are you able to see, when a show is only 10 or 15 minutes worth of stuff? Do you get involved at that level, or do you wait until you see first drafts or demos? What's the earliest you get involved in?
Just historically, generally there's a script, there's some demo songs. That's something that is not necessarily an idea in someone's head, but there's something I can, physically, not only myself consume, share with potential investors to kind of gauge their interest. But that's just kind of the way projects I've been involved in, that's the way it's worked out. There's the next show I'm doing is quite the opposite. I got the rights along with my partners to a story, and we found a book writer, and we found folks to put the idea together. It just, my expertise, I think, is more on the business side. It's how do you put together a good team? How do you sell a show? How do you sell as many tickets as possible? I'm not the type to say this B storyline in the second act is going off track and that's where we're losing people. I can certainly tell you what I think is and isn't working, but I'm not a dramaturg, and my specialty isn't, well, here's the 3 steps to fix this. My specialty is, I think, finding great material, putting together a great team, and then trying to figure out how to market that the best that we can.
So how do you find good material? And let me open a little parentheses there, because I know a lot of the folks that are watching this are gonna be like, oh, great, I'll send my script to Cody Lassen. You probably don't want to, see 4,000 scripts over your transom. How should folks approach you or not approach you, and with what materials? Does the demo need to be completely, finished and orchestrated and beautiful? How do folks reach you in what way?
Certainly I go to the festivals and I go to all the, regional theaters and kind of see what's happening for works that are kind of at that stage. If you're much earlier in the game, I'd say, first of all, it never hurts to email, whether it's me or any other producer out there. The very worst thing that will happen is I'll have a clogged inbox that day and I'll hit delete after, giving it a 5-second read. So that's the worst that will happen. The best that will happen is I'll reply and say, like, oh yes, that's interesting. Keep me in the loop. Tell me what's going on here. I would say customizing that message is key. If I literally almost every day get an email that just says, dear potential producer, see attached, information on my show. Do literally a 4-minute Google search on me. What kind of shows have I done in the past? What might my interests be? Is there some kind of connection there? If it's a personal email that you're sending me, even though it might be a form email and you're just changing 1 or 2 lines to make me think it's personal, I will always reply to you. It might take me 3 or 4 days to reply to your message, but I will always reply to you. Where if it's so obvious that this is something that I was BCC'd on with 100 other people, that's the one I'm likely to hit delete. Demos, anything you have, basically, I would put in that email. If you have a PDF of the book, if you have any kind of demo songs, a link to a Google Drive or something attached, I'm much more likely, if I'm on an airplane or waiting in line at the grocery store, to peruse that material rather than have to reply back and say, could you send it to me?
Do you mean that literally, waiting in line at a grocery store? Would you check my phone?
100%.
Wow, and listen to somebody's demo. It's like, okay, so that's, I've heard of elevator pitches, but not grocery line pitches. Like you.
Yeah, not just the grocery store, but we all find ourselves with, a minute here, 4 minutes there throughout the day. I try to every day go to sleep with my inbox at 0. So I use these 2 or 3 minutes as I can. And then I do, for the shows that I do think, again, if there's not a personal connection, I didn't approach you, I don't have a relationship with you, I will then, there's a couple of readers I work with, I will send in the demos to these readers to get their feedback, both because I just don't have the time in the day to read a bunch of full-length scripts, but also I want to make sure this isn't some quirky project that only Cody Lassen will buy a ticket to, but I want to get some constructive feedback from people who all they do is read scripts all day and tell me what their opinion is.
Yeah. That's a cool profession you've got. It's a really interesting job you've got. So here's a fantasy question. If I were to have $100 million, let's say it's even in cash, and I were to give it to you to use on developing new musicals, no strings attached, do whatever you want with it, what would you do?
Oh gosh. If I could go back in time, I would probably hire Bette Midler to do Hello Dolly and, hire the team that put together Wicked. But if someone really had that much money, and that's certainly an amount higher than I ever deal with, but there are certainly people who come to me who are investing seven figures. The first thing I'm going to say is, for most investors, spread that risk. Right? You might have somebody who's so in love with the project, they want to be the biggest investor on that project, so they have access to everything going on to it. But for the most part, my advice is the opposite of that. If you've got a lot of money, spread that around multiple shows, both because that could increase your chance of success and spread your risk out a little bit, but also you're going to now be a team member of all these shows. You're going to get to know the creative staffs. You're going to get to know the producing team working on these shows. So if that's why you're doing this, is to kind of get into the industry and get more experience, you're, I think, usually better off dividing that up and putting it into multiple shows. And investing in Broadway is not quite like investing in the stock market. Now, you do want to spread your risk around and choose projects of maybe you want to do a musical and a play and a revival and a new show. The flip side to that is, for most publicly traded companies, unless something has gone horribly awry, you can go to your broker and buy stock in it.
Right.
For Broadway shows that are, looked at as kind of a sure thing, you need to know somebody to get that invitation to invest in the show.
Right. So where do you think is the future of new musicals? We're sort of in a golden age of transition to where are we headed?
Gosh, that's a great question. I mean, you look at, people who are doing great things on YouTube right now. You look at, young talent, and I hate to use this to talk about Justin and Benj, because they've certainly been working at this for a while now. But it's not like it used to be, where you have to kind of, pay your dues and work your way up from, 99 seat black boxes to regional theaters to Broadway. I think the direct line between new talent and producers and theater owners and kind of the people who are making these decisions, that line has gotten so much shorter. That I don't want to say that anybody can write a show and get it produced, but I think it's much easier nowadays, if you have good material, to do some internet research and find 5 or 10 producers who might be attracted to your material and actually get it made. Where I think for many, many years it was a much more structured system of, you had to know these gatekeepers and have those connections to get your work seen.
So are you seeing, you mentioned internet musicals and so on, are you seeing that the live theater is going to transition or include live performances on your phones and so on? I'm asking you to predict a little bit there.
Right, part of the mission of theater is all 1,000 of us or 99 of us or however many people are in the theater for that night, experiencing something that will never be done again. Even if, the next day with the same cast and the same material, it's not going to be the exact same show. That will never be replaced. What I do think will happen is, you're going to see a lot more shows be streamed or be accessible via, these services like Broadway HD or on PBS, or Netflix now is getting into the game. I think the industry, is a little scared of that. They think that's cannibalizing ticket sales. You can certainly make the argument of, okay, well, let's do this only after shows have closed, that have been limited runs. I think the flip side is true. If you have something that's accessible to people who are not able to get to New York, that's a whole nother revenue stream of somebody who is never your ticket buyer. We talk about our audience growing older, and we don't have this next generation of theater goers taking their place to buy tickets or to subscribe to regional theaters. I think this is a great way to get people interested. If I can, stream a show for $19 rather than pay $180 for a ticket, am I more likely to take a chance on a musical and maybe fall in love and become a theater goer?
Yeah. So let me ask you a potentially self-serving question here. You're always so supportive of what we do here at New Musicals Inc. You're always so responsive and encouraging, and you show up when you can. So let me ask you, why is that? Do you support other organizations as fully as you support us, or why us?
Well, there are certainly several other organizations I support. I will say, I split my time between Los Angeles and New York. So it's kind of like rooting for the hometown team. There is so much good work being done in Los Angeles, and so many creatives out there that are brilliant, that I think are LA's kind of off the radar for the New York theater scene.
Yeah.
That's, for both Spring Awakening and Indecent, and I just did a revival of Merrily We Roll Along. We started in LA, and my next show is starting in Los Angeles. There's just such a great talent pool there and a great theater community that I very selfishly want to help nourish that and make it even bigger and stronger than it is.
That's a great.
Especially the recent developments that are, putting some roadblocks.
Yeah.
So I think I would support you guys regardless, but the fact that you're LA based is even a nice bonus.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, I'd love to talk off the record about the recent developments. Not that what we have to say is secret, but just not relevant to this particular conversation. So, all right. Then, lastly, Cody, do you have some advice that you'd like to give to writers of new musicals? They're trying to plan ahead for what's my next musical. What would you say to them?
I would say write something that you're passionate about. I think the moment you try to write something that you think the market is going to respond to, that's not going to work. Don't set out to write the next Hamilton or the next Dear Evan Hansen or the next Phantom of the Opera. Write something that you think, you're going to be excited about. I would say collaborate as early as possible. Whether that means, your fellow creative. So maybe you wanted to write the book, music and lyrics. I think it's always a good idea to not do that, right? I think the tension and the checks and balances of having two different ideas can really help streamline a musical and solve problems. The more smart people you have at the table, the better off the project will be. I'd say that if you think your project has either commercial potential or potential to be seen at a regional theater, get those people involved as early as possible. Again, they might ignore your email. You might be sent to an intern rather than a reader, and you'll never get feedback. But kind of the earlier you can get some of that feedback, whether it's just a 1-sentence reply or a 30-second phone call, I think the better off the project will be. Again, if that's your goal, is to get it seen by a bigger audience, because there are certainly passion projects that are not intended to be seen by a big audience.
Right. Excellent. Great. Thank you so much for your time, Cody. You're articulate and supportive, and a great producer, investor, smart guy, and we're happy to have you as the industry. I thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Happy to help.
Okay.